The Saltwater Crossing. The air below deck was thick as porridge and twice as suffocating. Heat clung to every surface, wet and woolly, sour with sickness, heavy with human breath. Lotta pressed the back of her wrist to her forehead, then quickly to baby Johannes's. Still too warm. He lay curled against her chest like a fevered bird, his breaths shallow, his tiny lips twitching now and then, as if he dreamed of milk that wasn't there. The lantern swayed above, casting dull orange light across the low beams and plank walls, catching briefly on damp cheeks, frayed sleeves, cracked lips. It was a world of motion and murmurs, shadows and silence. Nothing stayed still. Not the ship, not the people, not the fear. She rocked gently on the narrow bench, more from instinct than choice, her back aching from days without sleep and weeks hunched protectively over her children. Her dress was damp with sweat and seawater, the hem stiff with salt. She reached down to pull August's blanket back up over his shoulder. He had slipped again, his small hand now resting on the bare floor, cold and vulnerable. His knuckles were red from where he'd scraped them climbing below deck. His face looked thinner than it had back in Stockholm. No longer the round-cheeked boy who'd run down cobbled streets, chasing marzipan wrappers. Already the softness of childhood was falling away like leaves in frost. "Sleep, Elskling," she whispered, tucking a stray lock of hair behind his ear. Just sleep a little longer. Around them, the steerage compartment groaned with the sounds of suffering. A low hum of coughs and prayers, shifting bodies, and the occasional rustle of someone retching into a bucket behind a curtain. A baby cried in the distance. A mother's lullaby, worn down to a hum, tried to meet it. Somewhere nearby, a man was singing quietly under his breath. A hymn, maybe, though the words were lost in the sway of the ship. Lotta closed her eyes for just a moment, but then it came. The lurch. Without warning, the ship pitched hard to port. A deep groan split through the wood, a low, terrible sound, like the belly of a wounded animal. Crates shifted with a thud and clatter. A tin cup spun across the floor and smacked her ankle, leaving a blooming bruise. She grabbed the beam above her with her free hand and held fast, Johannes tight in the other arm. Someone screamed, a voice, sharp, high. "Gud hjälp oss!" A toddler rolled from a bunk and began howling. A suitcase slid from a shelf and cracked open, spilling clothes and a small Bible into the sloshing corner. The ship tilted again, this time to starboard, slower, as if reconsidering. Lotta gritted her teeth and whispered over and over, "It will pass. It always passes." The wind above howled like a banshee, tearing across the deck. Water slapped the ship's hull again and again, booming like fists against a door. Somewhere near the ceiling, a rope creaked in a rhythm too steady, too ominous. The boards beneath her feet groaned with strain, and the scent of vomit and fear thickened. August woke with a gasp and clutched her arm. His face was pale, his eyes wide. "Is it sinking, Mama?" "No," she lied, without hesitation. "Just a storm. The sea wants to scare us, but we're stronger." He swallowed. His lips cracked. "Are we close yet?" She didn't answer, not right away. A hand rested on her shoulder. It was Ingeborg, the older woman from Jönköping who always seemed to appear when someone needed calm. Her long silver braid was damp at the ends, but her eyes were steady. She pressed something into Lotta's palm, a sugar lump. she whispered. Give it to the little one when he wakes. We are nearly there. Nearly there? But what did that mean, really? Was it hours? Days? Would they see land by sunrise, or another endless stretch of grey water and grey sky? Lotta nodded and curled her fingers around the sugar. It began to melt almost immediately, leaving a grainy sweetness on her skin. She wiped it against her skirt, then gently opened Johannes's mouth and tucked it beneath his tongue. He stirred and sighed, but didn't wake. Thank you, Lotta whispered, blinking back tears. Tack! Ingeborg squeezed her hand and disappeared back into the dim blur of bodies. Lotta leaned her head against the wall and let her breath slow. The ship still creaked and swayed, but the storm seemed to be passing. Or maybe they were just getting used to it. The constant fear, the constant motion. Her mind drifted. She thought of Niels, her husband, buried last winter beneath the frozen soil outside the churchyard wall. She had wrapped him herself in the blanket from their wedding bed. Pneumonia, the doctor said. But she knew better. It was hunger. It was despair. He died not with a cough, but with silence. The kind that grew like mold in the corners of a house, too long without joy. They couldn't stay. Not after that. Not with the rent coming due, and no man to pay it. So she sold the copper pot, the spinning wheel, the walnut cradle, everything that didn't fit into a trunk. And she bought tickets. 2 for steerage. 1 for a baby who wouldn't remember this journey. Only the sound of her heartbeat and the smell of her skin. Mama, August murmured. Tell me the story again. What story, Elskling? The one about the tree. She smiled softly. The birch tree? He nodded. All right, she whispered, adjusting the blanket around both of them. There once was a little birch tree who grew on the edge of the forest. He was small and slender, and the wind bent him low. But he dug his roots deep and kept reaching for the sky, even when the snows came, even when the wolves howled. He just kept growing, because he knew that one day the sun would come back. Like us, August said sleepily. Exactly like us. She kissed his temple. His skin was cool now. He was already asleep. She looked down at Johannes, his lips sticky from the sugar, his lashes damp with sweat. She pressed her palm against his chest and felt the rise and fall of it, so small and steady. Her world had shrunk to this. A patch of worn wood, 2 blankets, a sugar lump. And yet inside her bloomed something stubborn and rooted. A kind of strength she didn't have the words for. She was scared. Of course she was. The sea could take them. The future could starve them. But she had children to carry and a shore to reach. That was all that mattered. She sat up straighter. Because if they were nearly there, she had to be strong enough to meet the land.